soaring through the air, right about to hit the ground. Oh God, this is death. But I'm alive. But am I a ghost? Is this ghost? Oh God, I feel like this is going to develop into something later.
But don't you have antipathy toward musicals? Let's be honest, right? You dislike musicals a little bit, right?
I avoid them, so in that way, yeah. But I never have a bad thing to say about musicals. I just understand that I'm not a part of the society that
loves
musicals to continue. So and they're not doing any harm, musicals don't hurt anybody.
Not really.
Usually.
Yeah,
I don't know. Maybe they do. I don't know, but I don't think so.
I've never heard of somebody being killed by watching a musical.
Yeah, but I see people crying and listening and watching musicals. And I'm like, hey, that looks like a legitimate, valuable thing for that person. Glad you enjoyed.
Glad you had that, friend. So, okay, well, that is about as neutral as you can get.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So, okay, I am less positive about. I'm a little bit on the negative scale with musicals. A musical's got to prove something to me. Just not a lot, just a little bit. Like when I walk in, I'm
if I'm going to sit down, things got to prove themselves to me.
Right, sure. Right. And but I'm a little bit more generically in that posture when it comes to musicals. It's like, okay, I'll accept that this is the one everyone thinks is very good. So I'm going to sit down and watch it and hope that I enjoy it. But I've only genuinely enjoyed maybe 10 musicals and 9 of them are Disney. And that's a bummer, right?
Yeah, Disney is a different thing to me.
But they are technically musicals.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
They're 100% musicals.
Yeah. They got the secret sauce. They got the treat sauce, whatever it is.
And maybe people will one day tell me oh, you liked Lion King, huh? Well, have you heard Friend or something like that? I don't know. What's a musical?
You'll be like, no. I avoided that.
Is that the same? Is that going to be the same experience or 100% the same experience? And I'm I guess I gotta watch Rent.
They start stomping on trash cans and stuff, and you're like,
yeah, dude.
I don't think
Stomp's something I can get behind because there's no real characters in Stomp. Wait, are there characters in Stomp?
Dude, no idea.
Stomp something that I don't think. I thought Stomp was musical performance. Is it a musical?
I mean, my narcissism tells me that. Yeah, I think Stomp has characters in some musical, but
it's Blue Man Group, right?
I have
no idea.
Hijinks. I have no idea. My ultimate.
What is Blue Man Group?
My ultimate rage out moment is anytime somebody talks positively about the movie of Cats the musical, as though, and not in it's fine for what it is. But listen, Cats the Musical is actually okay. When they're trying to put it out in the world like it's one of the other movies, I'm like, dude, no, it isn't. I can't have that.
You get the fuck out.
That's a Dave opinion. I can't have it. I can't let it lie. I just, I'm sorry. I can't do it. You know what I mean? And you see it once every few months on Twitter. You'll just see somebody being like, Cats the Musical is not always bad. It's like a C+ of a movie, and you're just like, isn't this why we cancel people? Isn't this what the purpose of that is? Get rid of this person. Get rid of them now.
Get rid of Cats? Are you saying cancel Cats?
Yeah.
It doesn't I don't know. I saw Cats once.
It was on a Patreon night, right? You watched
Cats.
It with Patreon.
Yeah, I watched a movie night with Cats on,
and it was bad.
And
right?
I was baffled.
Yeah,
I was baffled.
Yeah,
yeah. It's a very inclusive film. It's all of the themes in it are about everyone's okay. We're all okay. Everything's great except the meanies. The meanies are the bad ones.
Yeah, meanies are the bad ones, right?
and so get out of here.
I feel like there's an impossible a logic problem about Cats where you have to already like cats to like cats. You know what I mean?
The actual animal, or
no, Cats the musical and the movie. I feel like the only people who like it already liked it before they saw it. It's this strange syllogism where the premise of it doesn't work. Where you're just how did people start liking it?
It's catch-22 is what you're saying.
What's that? Yeah, it's catch-22. Yes, yeah, it's a logic problem. It's a paradox. It's how did people start with this? I don't get it.
I could see that. When I watched it, I was just like, why is this? But that's true about a lot of things that humans do.
Yeah, I appreciate your
why High School Musical? Why musicals?
That's what I'm saying.
Maybe I do have a thing against musicals.
Finally.
Maybe I do.
Oh,
it's just my ad hoc thing to go to, like, I don't understand it and I don't need to.
Come into my rage cave, baby. Come in here. I got a really nice brandy.
No, dude.
Really
like,
nice.
I know. You want me to do it. I'm not going to give it to you.
I do.
I'm not going to give it to you.
That's all I want.
No.
That's all I want.
Because I'm not that person.
Just come in.
Just not that person.
Come in. Just lounge on the couch. It's a nice couch. That's all I'm saying.
Who even knows if this is going to make
I hope none of it does.
Maybe
this
is just going to die on a hard drive.
I hope.
Maybe this is just going to die a sleepy eternity on a hard drive.
Literally all of this goes. I don't like any of it. I think it should all go.
I'm going to throw my computer in 10 years into a dump, and some random vagrant is going to hook up my machine and listen to our old podcast daily.
The cutting floors, like all the loose
and
ends.
be like, I knew.
Yeah, he's gonna listen to it. He's gonna be like,
I followed your entire catalog.
And look at the ruin it did in my life. Like, I lost everything following your catalog.
Yeah.
I love that idea.
You should have cut it.
Yeah. Honestly, good decision to cut it. Good decision.
Yeah. What are we doing?
I don't know. This is director. Hey, everybody. This is Directorpiece Theater. I am Adam Ganser, one of your hosts, and I am with my eternal companion and co-host, who says his name now.
I'm Abe Epperson. I don't think we did that for the last episode.
We didn't. We were fucking rebels.
I love it.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
Let's just keep going.
I know.
I'm Abe Epperson. This is Directorpiece Theater. You get it.
Yeah, you definitely get it because you clicked on it, probably. If not, and you got here somehow a different way, wow, congratulations, welcome. And this podcast I wanted to talk about, honestly, this is one of my favorite movies. Like if I had a list of favorite movies, and this,
it's a good movie.
Yeah, this is definitely like somewhere in the top 10, and I think you'll be happy to know I did not watch it until probably 2006 or 7 for the first time. I didn't see it till I was much older than when it came out. Is that did you watch it when it was in theaters? Probably not, right?
Probably not. I think I watched it in VHS because I definitely there was a tape that definitely had Heat on it, and I definitely watched it on a home video.
Like, I think I might have watched it because I saw a featurette about and then they had that scene with De Niro and Pacino. They'd never been in a movie before, and it was like, oh, okay, I'll watch that movie.
Yeah.
Which was kind of the selling point, right, of this movie. It was like one of the selling points.
Well, when it came out, I was 10,
right?
Because this was 95,
right?
And so I remember it being seeming more adult. You know, it's like you're 10 years old, you're not going to be like, oh, fuck, I'm going to get home and watch Basic Instinct or something like that. Heat felt like an adult movie that I would be like, it's probably got some, it looks like a cool action movie, and that's how it's billed, but there's something, my spidey sense is tingling. This has probably got a lot of scenes with people talking, right?
It doesn't.
And as a 10-year-old, no thank you.
It didn't scan entirely.
So it probably took me a few years.
Yeah, it didn't scan entirely as an action film. I think that's completely right. Even when you watch trailers, it doesn't really that are trying to make it feel like that. It doesn't totally scan. Just and that's actually one of the things I wanted to talk about today with it is sort of why that is.
But as you get older and wiser, this movie's my jam.
This movie's very good. And so we're going to talk about it in a lot of detail today. But I wanted to start with kind of just sort of a meditation on directing. In general, as kind of a lead into this.
Oh, good.
Yeah. So Abe and I know this because we were directors, and also because this is just sort of the nature of working in the digital creator landscape. But as a filmmaker, you are sort of constantly being forced to look through the zeitgeist and find ways to add something to that. Right? To create in that context, to know and comment on what exists in the world in pop culture.
You don't want to have a conversation that someone's already had.
Right. And
you want to have a new conversation.
And you're constantly aware of what's coming out and how does it feel and what is being done right now. I remember Abe and I having a conversation about long lenses and comedy right when I started at Cracked around 2012. And then having a different version of it a few years later after Birdman, where the lens stuff had sort of shifted. You remember those conversations? Because that was a thing we used to do. right?
I do remember that. But if I recall, it was more of this is Abe's strategy for
Of course,
this is how Abe
of
does
course.
comedy. Yeah.
Of course. No, none of us speak in universalisms here. It's just to say that as directors, that's a thing you constantly have to be aware of. And if you want to work on the internet anywhere, or in music videos or commercials, then you constantly need to be ingesting and then sort of regurgitating, for lack of a better word, sort of what's cool.
You need to know who's doing what and what's happening.
Yeah, and what's cool, what's out there.
Replacement.
You need to know, because otherwise you're going to make something somebody did last week, right? That's just the deal. And I think because of that, a lot of people who are, especially our aspiring filmmakers, have this kind of romantic connection to filmmakers who feel like they don't make stuff that is zeitgeisty. They make stuff that's way outside of the zeitgeist. And like some examples, like I feel like that's one of the reasons we all love David Lynch so much. It's like David Lynch is never making a zeitgeisty film. It's always some weird nonsense that's very David Lynch, right?
That's true.
Yeah. Or like I kind of admire Steven Soderbergh, who on the one hand will make something that's very zeitgeist defining, like Ocean's 11, but then after that it's like, now I'm going to shoot a movie on DV or VR or something. Like he made this movie Full Frontal. He shot it on DV on an XL1, which is like a cheap camera that Abe and I wouldn't even use. Like your phone is better than that camera.
It's so funny you mentioned that, because the GL1, which was the little brother of the XL1, was my first Canon camera, and it was what shot the first season of Agents of Crack.
That's incredible. The court that I worked at before I got into filmmaking and went to USC purchased an XL1 because they were hoping that I was going to make some instructional videos because I had communicated my interest in filmmaking. They bought an XL1 and I got into USC like maybe a week after they bought it. And so like
old school DV, mini DV, baby. I still got mini DV tapes in like a huge Tupperware bin at my parents' place.
Like I had like 30 little movies I made for my church that I shot on DV. And Soderbergh did that after he made Ocean's 11. You just gotta love that.
He jumped from 35 millimeter, probably shooting like Panavision or something like that, and then he jumps to a like $3,500 prosumer camera.
Right. I mean, you know, that's a decision because that's a guy who's like, I don't have to do anything anybody doesn't want me to do, and he's right. I think even filmmakers who sort of fit into the classic legends of the genre type, like the Kubricks or the Woody Allens of the world, also we have a romantic relationship with them, in part because of the stories they've told, but also in part because they don't have to make anybody's movie but theirs. Right. And that's very attractive. And then, of course, you find out more about them and you're like, you know, not worth it. But
sure. But I think I know what you mean, because it's like class, like it's like it's an age thing. They do what they want out of time. Right.
And like, I got to say, again, making a film that is a zeitgeist defining film is very difficult. Right. So like being Christopher Nolan, for instance, or Steven Spielberg is very difficult because, you know, their sensibilities are the one people are going to emulate. It's a lot easier to make a film that is clearly like sort of drifting off of, or drafting off of somebody else's headwind, you know, like for instance, there's the movie Them that just came out on Amazon. That's clearly an Us clone.
Yes.
Right. Or like, you know, to go a little further back, Swordfish, clearly a Matrix clone, right? You know, and that's existed since forever. There's a big hit movie, defines the zeitgeist. Here comes 15 movies imitating it.
Yes.
But what's even harder than either of those two things is to make a film that ignores the aesthetics of the times altogether and still works, or still manages to be successful. And that's what makes this movie, Heat, which was made and written, directed by Michael Mann, such a great movie to go back and rewatch. Because just here's some stats on it. First thing is, not a huge financial success. It only made $187 million at the box office, which, you know, that's not nothing. But the movie cost a lot to make, number one. You can see that. And it was the 25th highest grossing film of the year. It got literally obliterated by Die Hard with a Vengeance, Toy Story,
what a year.
Apollo 13, GoldenEye, Batman Forever, Waterworld, and a bunch of other films that you've heard of.
Ooh, Waterworld, that zeitgeist.
I know, Waterworld
Leader.
beat this movie. Waterworld beat it.
It's that Kevin Costner charisma.
It's that ichthyosapien dollars, baby.
Yeah,
those
dude.
gill dollars just flying in.
We all wanted to fuck Kevin Costner. Let's just be honest.
He was
what it was, and say that we all wanted to fuck Kevin Costner.
Like, whose idea was that ponytail? Be honest. Whose idea is that ponytail that he had in that movie?
Nobody's.
Yeah, it just happened.
Yeah. God's.
Yeah. Yep.
Is that an answer that
I think
is
it's
acceptable?
possible. In that world, absolutely possible.
Mm-hmm.
So look,
Mm-hmm.
it's also Heat was also not a prestige success, like a critical darling, in the sense of getting awards and stuff. It got beaten out by Braveheart, same year, Apollo 13 again, Sense and Sensibility, and then Babe. Fucking Babe kicked its ass at
Babe.
the award
Babe
circuit.
rips, dude.
Babe's a great movie.
Don't talk shit on
it'll
Babe.
do. That'll do.
If you,
Babe will do.
That'll do indeed.
Yeah.
So yeah, you're making a good point. It's not. I mean, that's kind of why it's not on like the tip of the tongue when we talk about 1995. But also, it's a memorable enough movie, but I think for only certain people, because it's not. It wasn't a financial success. It's not exactly a cult movie. It wasn't even a critically like superior movie.
It was like appreciated by film critics, but not lauded enough to get awards. Really,
it just sounds like it's a pretty good, but nothing to write home about.
It's the kind of movie you forget. But the problem is, we didn't. It has endured. In fact, I think you can argue that
for some people.
Well, check this out.
Some people have forgotten.
It's like, I think it might be the most influential film of that year. If you think about the way that it has inspired the way we tell crime stories, a lot of video games, like Grand Theft Auto in particular, very indebted to this movie. The Batman movies that Chris Nolan made, and literal crimes. There were actual crimes that imitated this movie. Numerous actual crimes.
That is insane.
I know.
Yeah, you get those. Those pop up every now and then. You get like a seminal film that is like. It's not like someone going back and saying like, you know, Tarkovsky's Stalker changed sci-fi. It's like, yeah, anyone who's like studied a little bit of sci-fi films knows that that's a classic movie. The reason most people don't know of it is that it's pretty old and it's like a foreign film.
Right.
This is like made in the same system and it's influential, yet it's not remembered.
Right. It's not like it's a Velvet Underground album. You know what I mean? Right. Where it's like, yeah, everybody who listened to it started a band. Like, that's the kind of thing you think of as being the influential but not known. This is not that. It's a pop film in some ways. But just so you know, like, even Michael Mann did not think this film was necessarily an enduring story. Like, this wasn't his passion project. He tried to sell the script, which, by the way, 180 pages, his first draft. He tried to sell it in 1979. He continuously was offering it to directors. They all turned it down. He converted it into a television pilot in 1989. They made it. And then, you know, they wanted to do changes. He said no.
Ooh, baby, gotta make this heat.
Yeah. He said no. So the show failed. So he literally kept trying to make it, but also get rid of the idea. Just like, hey, somebody take this. Let's get it done. And then finally got the movie to get the money together in 1994, and it all just kind of fell into place. So that's, you know, I think that alone is weird that a director went through that kind of a journey for this film. And like, now we're kind of arriving at the thesis of this episode. Heat is also a film that sort of eschews, if you will, the visual tropes and language of the era that it was made in. Like, it feels and is inspired by totally different things. And so what that means is, instead of being like a bombastic, emotionally evocative action film, like so many of its contemporaries, like particularly that Die Hard flick, Heat is kind of a slow burn. It's kind of more of a simmering movie. And Michael Mann is making sort of deliberate choices to elevate his material into something that's, like, I would argue, more transcendent, more meaningful than the films that he chose to avoid making, that are his contemporaries. So that's what we're going to talk about, is how Heat ultimately undermines and then transcends our expectations as an action movie and as a drama. That's what we're going to do.
Interesting.
Okay. Let's hope.
I kind of want to know what you think at this point, like in the late 80s, early 90s, what is like,
what is the typical cinema?
What's the typical like tropes of
right.
An action movie?
Well, that's got to become clear as we go through.
Cool.
As almost all of our arguments do. What I really mean by that is cinematic tactics for the most part.
Okay,
but not exclusively that. That's partly what I mean, and also just sort of a combination of elements that gives it a feeling that is not present in other films. So hopefully I will be able to make that clear enough for you and the audience.
So like techniques.
Yeah, mostly that's what I mean. Yes, and almost everything we're going to talk about is techniques.
Cool.
Because that's what we're here to do. So that's what we're going to do.
Mm-hmm.
So okay, to start, in Heat, Michael Mann makes a bunch of choices that are counter cinematic to their time, and by doing that ends up sort of transcending the conventions of his genre. So like he has a quote, right, which is sort of inspired this episode, and that quote is, "Heat is a drama, not a genre film." That is what he thinks he made in Heat, and I'm going to make the argument for how he sort of approaches that, because most people still remember it and think of it as a genre film, and it's actually more than that. And I'm going to show you how. So, first thing is lens choice, right? Now, if you like Google Heat on the internet, you're going to see a trillion articles about his lens choices. And one of the reasons why is nothing else looks like this in the time. Okay, so like he shot most of the city of Los Angeles on a very long lens, like a 75 to 100, right, Abe? Like, did you see much beneath those?
Nah, yeah, it was mid-range to like extremely telephoto in some instances. Yeah.
Right, and like now, bear in mind, guys, that this is in an actual city of Los Angeles landscape, which means he was almost never on a soundstage for this. He shot in completely authentic locations, and it demanded that all of them, if they could be, had never been in a movie before. Most of them hadn't, and still shot on a long lens. What that means is his distance from himself to the subject has to be way bigger than if I was on a wide lens. I could get much closer to the thing I'm filming, and he's shooting in environments he can't completely control. So like he's already taking a massive risk as a filmmaker to shoot this movie this way, right?
Telephoto is also good for not having control too, though, because it compresses the space.
Correct.
So like if you have extras leaning in or whatever, you can cut a lot of it out. So it's probably a decision that was also made with like out of necessity.
Yes, it's a little bit of both. It doesn't. So let me make these two observations, because what you said is really helpful. So most action movies of that time, and even today, are not shot on telephoto lenses like that. The reason is wide-angle lenses, as we've discussed in many other episodes, like the Dark Knight one in particular, but others too, are way better for camera movements. The reason is because when you're on a wide-angle lens, you can feel things moving on the z-axis better than if you're on a long lens, okay? The best illustration, I always go back to this, go watch the chase scene in Indiana Jones when he's running away from the natives in the first movie, Raiders of the Lost Ark. There's a scene where he runs up over a hill, and it feels like it's taking forever for him to get over the hill, and the natives are right behind him. That's a long lens. And then there's a scene that Spielberg cuts to like right away, where he's way far away from the natives, like 2 shots later. That's a wide lens, and so you can feel the movement of the subject. And also, if you were on a dolly or a Steadicam, the camera way better on a wide lens, okay? So because he uses the long lens, we also are not really on the same traditional tools like dollies and Steadicams as often as we might be in an action film. So what that means is I'm not on a dolly much. I'm not doing a lot of Steadicam. There is some, like especially when we're entering a big space, but like for the most part, he's doing a lot of this work with tilts and cuts and pans. So sort of making the camera almost like curious, like the camera's finding things, if you will, instead of like setting up shots that are flashy.
Yeah, there's fly on the wall kind of documentary style.
Yes. Correct. So, and that leads to exactly what you're making the first point. So each of these points I'm going to make is essentially, we're going to talk about the functional reason why a director would do this, and then the sort of poetic reason why Michael Mann's doing it that I hope you might see as transcendent. So the functional reason here is, as Abe said, sometimes you can sort of erase things you don't want to see. That's completely true. But also, it gives us this feeling of surveillance, which is a kind of a theme of the film. Like, long lenses feel to us as though we are watching the subject from a distance because we can't actually get close to them, right? So it sort of builds this feeling of voyeurism into our consciousness. And, in this movie, that's literally happening often. Like, they're actually surveilling people, and there's actual surveillance cameras. And we even get, like, angles that sort of imitate that.
Yeah, they foregrounding.
Yes, tons of foregrounding.
Super helpful.
Yeah, but, like, we're not often, or maybe ever, maybe like once or twice, but we're very rarely actually looking through a surveillance camera or like a still photography.
Oh, yeah.
They're just imitating that to sort of give us the feeling of it. And what's subtly happening here is that Michael Mann is sort of underlining for us, these are professional criminals. These are not like funny guys, or like, this is not a slapsticky, bombastic type of movie. This is the kind of person that you can't get close to them unless you're spying on them 24/7. Right? So it sort of heightens our feeling of how professional these people are. They're the best of the best, right? Now, the other thing that it allows us to do is the long lens creates a companion aesthetic. And that companion aesthetic is we get these gigantic close-ups. Like, we're zoomed way into their face. Sometimes even just pieces of their face. Which gives us a really big level of intimacy with the emotions of the characters. So even though that feels like sort of antithetical to the idea of surveillance, it actually goes along with it, because that's what you're trying to get in surveillance, is like this intimacy where they don't know that you're around. And Michael Mann sort of creates that aesthetic with these massive close-ups. And
it's also like Alexander McKendrick wrote, he's the guy who Sweet Smell of Success. Like, he wrote a book about talking about the cherub of the movie. It's something I've alluded to a few times. Cherub being like this, like cherub because of the arrow. Like, there's every movie has its cherub, meaning like the visual aesthete that makes the movie feel like the movie, like what the movie is looking at, right, as opposed to like a point of view shot or something like that. It's like, what is the eye of the movie? And sometimes that eye, and like in this case, it's like kind of got that surveillance, or in the case of the cops, like the surveillance kind of aspect. You can have an extreme close-up that still feels right, but because the camera operator is still using the same bag of tricks, like slightly handheld or whatnot, it still feels intact. Yep. And so, yeah, you can kind of have your cake and eat it.
Which, too. Yeah, and that's, again, a really smart filmmaker knows that. Like, builds an aesthetic that it makes that kind of compromise and the audience doesn't feel it, and it works. Now, one of the reasons why we need to be this intimate with the characters is that there are incredibly dramatic decisions made in this film that happen split second. One of the biggest ones is Charlene, played by Ashley Judd, tips off Chris that the house is compromised and that he can't come home. She does it with like a one-time single flick of her wrist. Like a very tight close-up. They don't repeat it. They don't labor on it. It happens very quickly, and he knows. Why? Because we're used to studying the people this closely to find the cracks. This movie basically hinges around 2 or 3 key decisions, one or two small mistakes that get out of control. And Michael Mann needs us to study their faces to believe and follow these dramatic choices. A couple other just very brief examples. When Chris decides to start shooting in the robbery, like that right. Shootout, that is an instantaneous decision. And we're on a very tight close-up. We get a single shot of him seeing a cop with a gun, and he starts shooting. And you're never like, why did he do that? You know exactly why he did it. Because you've been studying his face. It's awesome. It's so good. And it also, again, speaks to his professionalism. Like, this guy's for real. He'll go at the drop of a hat, and he did. Every single decision Robert De Niro makes in this film is basically on this list, but like the two that really stand out, when he goes after Waingro, who's like the piece of shit guy that they hire that fucks everything up in the beginning of the movie, he finds out where he's staying in the hotel, and there's a decision that's made in a close-up. They have a fantastic car ride sequence with some lighting stuff that we'll get to later.
Oh, yeah.
He makes it in a close-up, and boom, we're gone. Same thing for when he bails on Edie. He sees just like the hint of Vincent coming. Like, you couldn't even make out who it is exactly, but he sees just the hint of Al Pacino's detective Vincent coming, and you get that close up, and he's like, that's it, I gotta go. And it's awesome, you know? So yeah, that's one of the functional reasons. Sorry, go for it.
No. I'm just trying to think of, you just made it very clear that they're almost all for the same reason. Yes. Those moments, they all, like, I know that those moments, like, texturally, they feel the same, but I always thought that there was like a slightly different motivation. But it's like the camera is operating like it's almost like that's one bag of trick, even though there could be, they felt like many different bags of tricks because of the, I guess the emotional context of the moments are all vastly different.
But he knows, again, Michael Mann knows, like, I don't need to do this in a fancy way to to draw attention to this. As long as I've done my work as a director correctly, it will work.
It also speaks to, like you mentioned with Charlene, like the little nuance, we're looking, because we're like, the film itself, like the shot makes me want to scan things, because I'm like, what am I looking for? When you do see it, the close-ups are like kind of overkill in some instances, because of, I think, what you're probably going to allude to later. It's become commonplace at this point. To like our as an audience member, our film grammar has advanced enough within this certain, genre, even though, it sounds like Mann hates that term. But he did create a genre in a sense. We're so used to it that it's like, it feels like it's a little slower or a little bit more basic than a lot of things. And I think it's probably because it's one of the first.
It's like, that's usually, no, they just copied his language.
The case with seminal stuff.
Yeah, they just copied it. Because it works so well. Like, one thing I love about this movie that these close-ups give us, Val Kilmer has a scar by his eye, right? Like in some ways a very theatrical scar by his eye, right? Like, it's a very, it's almost a silly thing, but it's, nobody ever says a word about it, and it's very faded. So, like, you wouldn't even see it if we weren't in these close-ups, right? But because we are in these close-ups, it has that tiny little psychological checkbox that's being marked criminal. You know what I mean? Like, it's doing that. And even though, like, that's ultimately kind of a prejudice that Mann is playing against, it still kind of works, Yeah. Smart filmmaking in some ways. So here's the other thing, and this is kind of like the trickier part of this argument. The poetics, some of the poetic reasons why he might do this, and we talked about a few, but here's another one. This camera technique, the long lenses and the intimate close-ups, sort of gives us two almost offsetting effects, right? It's one of them is extreme intimacy, as we talked about. The other is the idea of observing them in a voyeur distance. So we kind of have both feelings, which, as we said, they're almost counterintuitive. And this bag of tricks, as Abe would say, allows the director to basically alternate between those two emotional poles throughout the movie for all the characters. And consequently, we are able to root for everybody in the film, that never happens, right? Like, this is a movie where you're rooting for everybody. You're rooting for Al Pacino. You're also rooting for Robert De Niro. You're rooting...
By the way, when Hank Azaria shows up in this fucking
right?
movie.
Yeah. You're like, what?
I was like, I totally forgot this shit. I totally forgot.
He's
this.
in so many things that are like, why?
And Henry Rollins. It's the cast is insane.
Yeah, great cast.
Insane cast.
It really is. This is like one of the first big Sizemore moments, and he had a big moment in the sun after Saving Private Ryan, you know?
Oh, for sure. I mean, because everyone's like a psychopath in these movies.
Yeah.
And it's like they're all unique psychopaths. That's the crazy thing.
Like Val Kilmer is a person who's like kind of unhinged, but like it's under the surface enough that you don't think of him as a maniac until it comes out. Whereas Sizemore is very much your standard, like, you gonna fuck with me, man? Like, he's that guy.
Right.
Right. And it works in this movie because he's the only guy like that. You know?
Also, can a shout out to Danny Trejo in this movie who plays a character named Trejo.
Yeah, I loved it.
Like, they just are like, what's your character? Just, you know, like you. Like,
you played Trejo.
It's you. You're just going to play the thing that you've been playing.
Well, we'll talk about him briefly later on. I will say, no, it's fine. I love that you brought him up. I will say the close-up on him when he's dying is terrifying.
Oh, fuck.
Yeah.
Fuck. He did a great
really
job.
Upsetting. Well, the makeup's also very good there.
Yeah, it's haunting.
And Michael Mann, he'll get right in there. So anyway.
He does not pull punches.
So as I was saying, the point here being that because we have these two languages of sort of extreme intimacy but also distance, like voyeur, we can root for everybody. And because we're rooting for everybody, it sort of does this background thing that you don't think about, which is it raises the stakes because they can't all win. Somebody's got to lose here. And because somebody's got to lose, that means some people are in danger. Some people's spouses are in danger. And this is sort of like a great locking of horns. And you don't know exactly what you want to happen. And that's an unusual experience in a movie. And Michael Mann got us there with this lens choice is, my feeling about it. Do you disagree with that? Or does that feel...
Yeah, I don't disagree with it at all. I think it's interesting because at the beginning of your argument, which shows that it's like, I think probably a pretty good argument. I wanted to mention another 1995 film that used telephoto. Like, I thought it was more important to point out that he wasn't necessarily the director that brought like telephoto into this genre necessarily. I think he is, but we're forgetting this same year
in Las Vegas,
Bad Boys came out. Bad Boys. So,
how telephoto is Bad Boys? Is it super telephoto?
Very. I mean, it's just Michael Bay's bag of tricks all the time in terms of how to cover coverage. But you're like, if you watch the movie and your kind of breakdown about like the methodology inside the telephoto, like not just the lens choice, but like why the lens choice is being used, none of that stuff is in Michael Bay. Michael Bay does it because it looks good.
He feels
Michael Bay does it so that he uses wide sometimes. He's not like entirely telephoto. I don't want to misrepresent that, especially when he's on like dollies swerving around,
right? Which is
the Bad Boy
what
shot.
I remember of that show.
But he, if you look at his entire canon, he is the guy. He's Mr. Telephoto in terms of like action sequences. He loves running, kind of like when I was talking about Speed. That was all. That was very. If you want to show the background moving very quickly, zoom in. And so I think that's the speed of man is not important. That's not why he's using the telephoto. He's using the telephoto for reasons that you're mentioning. And so I misappropriated what you initially were like, he brought like telephoto as a choice in the genre. It's transcendent. And I'm like, well, there's other people who were kind of doing that lensing at the same time, but not in the way that
not for this effect,
not in the way that he's doing it. And also like fucking Christopher Nolan, like must have just watched this movie over and over.
He said that
before Dark
Knight.
He
said that in interviews. He said in interviews, like, I'm indebted to Heat for Dark Knight for exactly that reason.
Yeah, it's just all over the camera.
100%.
Exactly.
So the next aspect I want to talk about, we covered lens length, is the color palette, Now, this observation is not like the deepest observation, so I'm not going to pretend like it is. But look, this is a cool color palette, right? This is a like a lot of blues, a lot of greens. It's not a very bombastic color palette, like say a movie like The Mask, or ooh, or even whoa there, buddy, whoa, or even even Bad Boys, right? Which has I would say a much warmer and more explosive, pun intended. Color palette. This movie's color palette is very moody. And again, like your explosion is going to look less good on a long lens with a cool color palette. You know what I mean? Like it's just not going to be as cool.
Yeah.
So the other thing is this movie does have warm colors intentionally. It has warm colors, but it uses them at sort of innocuous times, like dinners, or when the cops are at home with Charlene, or like the dance club at night when Vince is like trying to get information from Tone Loc. Love that he was in it. Yeah, you made it. Tone Loc's back, baby. I love that he was in it. Also, that interview scene that he has with the other guy who leads him to Tone Loc, where he's like, "Give me all you got."
Holy fuck!
One of my favorites.
Holy fuck that.
And Al Pacino is like, "What are you doing?" He's out of control.
What
it's
are
great,
you doing, buddy? I fucking love.
Me too. This movie has some very good Pacino quotes.
And oh my god, Val Kilmer in this is like proto John Wick. Can I say
a little bit. Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah, because he's just all business. All fucking business,
the coldness of him, again, to use this cool color palette concept. He is very cold. He is very calculating, right? Again, the warm color palette is sort of seemingly underlining the wrong emotions. Like if you're trying to make a movie feel intense, this feels like the opposite thing that you would do. Right? Like in a sense, this color palette, if you believe in the psychological values of colors, which again, I think they fluctuate. But if they're, in any sense in which they're given or used in a culture at a time, this is the opposite, right? So why does he do it? The first reason is the cool color palette keeps us primarily centered on the actors. Like we're watching them more than we're watching like the things happening in the background or like the weird foregrounded elements. It sort of directs our eye, right? Because it's nothing splashy or, nothing that is eye-catching like a warm color or like especially like a bright saturated color would do, right? So there's that reason. Another reason is it sort of reinforces the inner world of the character. It draws us into the same emotional headspace that these characters are all in. And by the way, everybody in this movie pretty bummed out about life. There's not nobody's having a good life in this movie.
And that kind of is in par for course for the muted colors because it's like a pretty desaturated,
right?
With a few exceptions.
Right. Like if you want a contemporary film at the time doing almost identically the same thing with color, watch Leaving Las Vegas. Leaving Las Vegas, also very cool color palette, and man, is that a bummer of a movie. Good movie, but just very upsetting. Similar moods. Okay. So again, I'm not saying that blue always means this and red always means that. I'm just saying that in general, using this color palette sort of brings us these two effects. Now, the tricky thing here that he's doing as a director is this color palette is actually obscuring two tactics he's using a little bit more forcefully to direct the emotions of his film. The first is saturation. So this movie is like mostly pretty desaturated, right? It's not one level of saturation the whole time. It's like just feels a little bit sort of the colors are a little dull most of the way through the movie.
Yeah, it's pretty Michael Mann.
Right. This is what he does.
Like if you watch like Miami Vice or something like that, which is a movie that has like bleached colors. He still finds a way. He uses the bleach bypass. That's basically
it's what he likes. But he does pump up the saturation in moments of emotional vulnerability. He does do that. In fact, there are two very key moments where that happens. The first is at Neil McCauley's house, that Malibu house. Every time he's out there looking at that water,
the background,
that water is like mega blue.
Popping.
Yeah, mega blue. And we know he cared about it because he obviously blue screened or green screened the scenes with Edie and Neil McCauley so that he could get that saturated blue. Right. So like you can tell they're actually blue screened there so that he could keep these awesome shots of the LA landscape, this like sort of dreamy landscape. Because again, it implies there's a dream out there, right? His melancholic dream is still something he's chasing. Right. And this world that he's in, it's not quite a fulfillment of it. Right. So there's that. Now,
and I think he's doing that in color timing because this guy overexposes all the time.
He does.
Like it's one of his
things.
He does
love doing that.
And then in post kind of pulls back the shadows. And so that's kind of the look because it gives this contrasty look. That blue, if you oversaturate, you get a lot of white highlights, which would just drown out your blue. So that means he's bringing it back after the fact, which means it's intentional.
He's also doing that in the scene where Edie and De Niro are in the car and they're just about to leave and get away with this crime, and they pass under the lights of the tunnel, and it gets
and it just blinds you.
It just blinds you, and you knowing how much control this guy is exerting over the film, you're kind of like, why do you leave it in? And then you realize like, oh, that's what this moment is. It's the fleeting moment where it seems like it's going to work and then it doesn't.
Yeah, it's shell shock.
And it's beautiful.
Yeah.
It's just a beautiful shot. Again, sort of telling you how much poetry there is in what this guy's doing. So the other just color saturation point I wanted to make is the dinner scenes that are warm are very saturated comparatively. And that's because of the second thing that he's doing with color, and that is he's using the warm colors to quote unquote expose his character. Like that's what he's doing. So just think about, when are we seeing the warm colors? It's in the intimate sort of portraits with the family members.
The family stuff,
even the gang members, they have like a dinner with like kids and stuff, like wives and kids, and it's this very bright warm space, while they're being watched.
Right. Yeah. I thought it was like kind of like outside and the streets are this cold, like lifeless kind of thing, but like the real life is in houses away from the peering eyes of
There's
police.
A little bit of that.
That's what I
but
got.
Like
that's
interesting. That's also possible. But like even Vince's house with his wife Justine, kind of cold. Mm-hmm. Like it's very black and white and kind of cold.
That's true.
And inside of Neil's house is pretty cold. Like there's a scene, for instance, after one of his many looking out at the ocean.
Yeah,
where he wakes up.
Yeah. So it's more tied to the character's emotional situation. If it's warm or if it's a warm house, it's warm.
Right. So Michael Mann is using this intentionally, and he's sort of ramping it up as the movie goes along. A couple other just very brief examples. So like Don Breeden's character, that's the guy who's the driver, who we meet him basically just to give him a shitty job as an ex-con.
Right.
And then he gets killed, right? And normally this kind of character, totally disposable, right? But we get this scene where he's drunk after his job with his wife or girlfriend, I think it's his wife, who tells him like, I'm proud of you. And it's this very warm, really beautifully shot scene that makes everything that comes after just totally tragic,
Right. Yeah. I think that's the point. Is that he's like, live fast, die young kind of idea.
And it's like, he's willing to give it one more shot to actually live, and that was the day that it all came calling back. And like sort of the final moment of the film, like the catharsis of these two color schemes, is during the actual chase scene where Vince is chasing after Neil McCauley. And, it's in this like empty airfield basically at LAX. And it's a lot of cool colors, but then they have this thing where there are lights being flashed at the airplanes as they're landing or taking off. And it's like bathing them both in the warm light, almost like a siren. And it's like a spotlight. It's literally a spotlight on them. And it ends up being the reason why Neil McCauley is killed at the end, is the exposure of it. And I think like that's sort of like what we were leading to with this color scheme in general. And the antithesis of it is Charlene's decision when she warns off Chris. She walks from the warm light into a deliberately placed blue light to warn him off. Right?
Right. Which is a good thing to do in your shot to show change. He does that. Oh, you didn't even talk about the 180 line, which is one of I know it's not even a part of it, but like his command of the 180 line in in these sequences where like something fundamentally changes for a character, he switches the 180 line all the time.
Yeah.
And this is the color equivalent of that, you know? It's like saying warm color, cold color, you know, and it's just like it's the same kind of drastic change.
And yet again, in execution, it's totally invisible to the average moviegoer.
Because the light was always there.
Exactly.
You know, you saw it.
Exactly.
You know, it's just, she walked over there. So of course now she's in that
It's just
light.
like, this is the kind of thing that I, as a director, admire very much, because like they're very cool. Strong decisions. They're not subtle decisions. They're very strong ones. But it
reminds me of that shot by Deakins or Sam Mendes rather in Revolutionary Road, where they're walking down puddles of light down a long hallway, and they timed it and spaced the puddles of like the top lights so that what's her name?
Kate Winslet.
In that movie? What's her name? Kate Winslet and DiCaprio are never in the light together. Like they're far away from each other, so they're never in the same light, but they're also like, as he goes into darkness, she goes into light, and vice versa, to show how they're desynced in like they just don't see eye to eye. They don't. It's not. They're not long for this world. It's just really cool to take something like that. That's a film that was up for all the Oscars and such. And this is a movie doing literally the same kind of maneuvers.
but in the action genre, you know.
Yeah, exactly.
So last thing I want to talk about that's related to this is sound design, which, you know, we touch on sometimes, but I thought it would be a crime to not talk about the big shootout at all. Since the shootout, the shootout's the thing everybody remembers.
It's what everyone talks about with this movie, right? It's so long.
It's incredible.
So
awesome. It's incredible. It's a masterpiece of filmmaking and action storytelling. So one of the things that's very surprising about it is there's no music in it. There's music building up to it, and then at the very end they bring some music back. There's no music in this shootout. Now you're like, okay, sure, but think about your favorite action scenes from other movies. Like, you know, I'll pick a movie at random. The Matrix, right? The Matrix, the coolest shootout scenes are also when you get that propeller heads track, you know, or when you get the really cool score that's like, you know, here we go, man. He's gonna one it up. He's gonna be the one. None of that in this movie, right?
And think about in the last like 8 years. A movie that, with the exception of like something like Baby Driver or something like that, where it's like literally setting a sequence or a montage to music, like scoring. Think about all of the Batmans and all of the like MCUs and stuff. When shit gets real, there's no music. It's this kind of impulse that, and you don't see that much in movies before this.
Correct.
Before Heat.
I love you. Thank you. You're doing exactly what I needed you to do. Just build me up, you handsome son of a bitch.
No, you're absolutely right.
So look, I'm not saying there's no music at all in this scene, but this music drops out the minute the shooting starts, okay? So why? Here's some simple reasons, okay? Functionally speaking, this is a very loud scene, and there's a lot of sounds in it. So like music might feel cluttered with all this like gunfire, right? Because there's a lot of gunfire.
Yeah, that's right.
So like, you know, it allows you to not feel overwhelmed by what's happening because there's a lot going on. So there's that. Now, the other thing is, it's probably the most realistic firefight scene I can think of in movies up to that point at all. It's one of them.
Yeah, I think of its influence on Warzone films too, because like obviously after 9/11, and even in the same year of 9/11, you got things like Black Hawk Down.
Yeah, Black Hawk Down. Yeah,
you want this movie? They wanted to make you feel like it's a war zone, right? Which doesn't have music.
Music takes away from that feeling. Music, because this feels almost, not quite, but almost like we're documenting it. There's some really great handheld camera work, especially with Val Kilmer, like all the loading and shooting and ducking behind the car stuff. Like, there's some really great camera work here that helps sell that. But the gun sounds themselves are, they feel authentic. And the reason why is because they are. They are the actual sounds that were being made by those actual weapons on the day. Like if I understood my articles correctly, this is production sound you're hearing, like enhanced production sound. So Michael Mann tried to bring in like, better gun sounds, like ones that are more movie-ish, like Hollywood gun sounds, and then kept being unsatisfied with it and ended up going back to the sound of the actual weapon on the day. That's what you're hearing. It adds to the authenticity of it. Now, the other thing that the gunfire instead of the music allows them to do is it allows them to stop using sound design at key moments, right? So like there are moments where they're not shooting and they're running, and those moments are terrifying, right? Because it's just footsteps and distant sirens and breathing, and you're just like, oh my God. And like they even kind of get away with the effect that we might call the tinnitus effect. They do just a tiny little bit of like the poetic.
Yeah, the shell shock.
The shell shock effect, correct. A thing that's
the Saving
Private Ryan used it very memorably. They do a little tiny bit of it for the death of Don the driver. Like they kind of drop out some of the sound and just hear sirens for when he is about to die. And it's a little bit of poetic license given what the film is, but you don't think about it because that's the end of that guy's story. And like you're like, no. And you don't expect that guy to die that quickly.
He gone.
Yeah, he gone. That's it, right? I mean, that's exactly it. Yeah. So like, and all I can say is, I'm getting a little older. This is the first time I watched the movie for this podcast. This was the first time when I watched it and felt sad when I was watching this action movie. I don't know if you relate to that.
Yeah. No,
I felt sad.
I watched it. I don't think I know I said I watched it like probably a year or two after it came out. I wasn't into movies at that point, like I wasn't thinking. The last time I watched it was probably college before this, and I remember it being very evocative and going like, oh hell yeah. And when I watched it again, it's an effective movie.
And and again, I can't tell if it's like that now we're at this point in history where there's been so many mass shootings and stuff, and like so that you get these feelings about it,
right?
But this time when I was watching it, and it had been a few years, the tragedy of it, like it felt very tragic. Just all of it, like you see innocent,
just everyone getting snuffed out.
Innocent people getting shot.
No, make it stop.
Cops are getting blasted to pieces. The driver like made a huge decision that was the end of his life. And you're like, and then like the worst part of it is Tom Sizemore's character, Michael Chiaretto, kidnaps a child. And like he is a father. That's why they even have that family scene. He's a father. He kidnaps a kid just to get away.
Right.
And by the way, Michael Mann knows that. That's why he starts putting music back in the film. Right? You get that driving guitar riff that ends with another gunshot.
Which another movie that was like pretty impressive, and at the same time taking a page out of Heat's book. If you 2002, I think.
Yeah.
Narc,
yeah.
Literally starts with this situation.
Yeah, that's right.
Grabs it like a pregnant.
You see how many references to this aesthetic you can make when you start thinking about it? Like, that's what this movie is. This movie became kind of a Rosetta Stone for how to do this kind of action. But, funny enough, I would say these cinematic choices actually serve a completely different master than action. And that is...
Yeah, I wanted to get back to what you're saying, because you said that Mann said that he doesn't feel it's a genre film. So far, your thesis is basically stated he's creating inside a genre, a new format of genre. I call that a genre film. So what do you see in Mann's words? I guess
what I see is that he is actually making what you might call a family drama out of this film. Like that's what this film fundamentally is. It's not fundamentally an action film in the sense that the action is not the centerpiece of what we care about. The action is plot, but the action is not the primary emotional engine of the film. The primary emotional engine of the film is like the cost that these men must pay to be in this life.
Okay.
And
all the stakes.
Yes, and specifically their families. Every single character in the film has a spouse or a girlfriend or a kid or all of those things. And it's a 3-hour movie. You know, like a 3-hour movie
Right.
means it's time to cut stuff. You know, like when it's an action film, like even in the 90s, that's what it meant. And instead,
Right.
we're spending all this time watching Robert De Niro go on a date. Or
It's funny you mention it because when you asked me, like, if you saw it, I was like, I was a kid and I had the spidey sense that it was gonna be about like some like family shit or something like that. And it was like, man, little did I know that, you know, flash forward 20 some years later, I would be like straight up talking about myself as a 10-year-old child.
just knowing.
Not being it, just knowing what Adam was going to talk about. No, you're right though. You're right. I think that's why so much of it. That's why the movie's so long. It's like so imagine let's make a genre film. Okay, it's a genre film. Let's assume that. And like so you want a lot of high body count, right? Imagine we got to know every single one of those people, and like every single time you rip one of them out of the world, you feel what you're actually ripping out of the world. They're just not like another crony. It feels like that's what Michael Mann is doing with this movie, which I can now see. That's why it's a genre.
That's what he means.
It's a
right.
tragedy.
And like, you know, we have that whole plot about Natalie Portman. By the way, just like, great actor for a kid, right? Incredible, right?
Yeah. I mean,
yeah, she's so good. Right.
Yeah.
And like she has that whole suicide arc that's very upsetting. It's like, whoa. And like watching Al Pacino deal with it is also very upsetting. And then watching her mother is like, oh no. And that's completely just about like the cost of Vincent's lifestyle as a detective on this marriage. Like that's what this is about. And like they really go into it. And like they even go through ups and downs, like in arcs within this relationship where at the end she's like, can't we find a way to make it work? And he's finally gotten honest. No, we can't. I can't. Like, you know, like I'm only what I'm chasing. That's all I am. And that's a very profound realization for an action movie. Let's contrast that with Baby Driver, for instance. Baby Driver, there's one romantic relationship that matters at all. And it's very surfacey. And we're supposed to expect it. Like we're supposed to take it as worth the risk. Right? Like it's literally reinforcing the opposite. And that's an action movie, right? Like that's what they're like. This isn't.
Yeah, it's because it's about the style.
That's right. And this is the opposite thing where it's like, no, we're gonna get dinners. We're gonna have marital intimacy issues. We're gonna have Ralph the revenge fuck. We're gonna have Natalie Portman committing suicide. You know, like we're gonna do all this. And because ultimately what this movie's about is the stakes of this life and a kind of romance between the job and real objects of romance, right? Which is why De Niro and Al Pacino, the hand holding at the end, which seems very like almost like an 80s movie kind of move. It's not. It's like this is the true partner that they're looking for. Like this is the spouse. You know, like they found that person for a brief period of time. This is the real love story here.
Right. Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, because they've been after each other for
so long. And not love story in like a dumb way, and not even love story in a metaphorical way. It's a real love story. You know, like
I mean, it's bromance, but it's like, yeah, I know what you mean. It's in the same way that like a buddy comedy or that would be like, or a buddy cop movie would be like they are each other's foils and they lift each other up, and they like we are following these two men's like need to destroy each other in order for them to achieve happiness.
Also though the need to be understood. It's both things because like both of them
they want to get out of this. They hate some aspects of their life, and they want people to understand that they're not who they just appear to be, and they want a family, they want more, and they're kind of begging everyone around them to say like, can I just finish this so that I can get to who I really feel like I am?
I can find my real intimacy. But the funny thing is, like, again, they have that incredible diner scene with just the two of them together, and what do? They compare dreams. Like it's like a very intimate thing they share with each other, right? Like this is what I think about. This is what's in my mind at night. This is who I really am.
Yeah, it kind of smacks of like some westerns.
Yeah,
you know?
but it's again, it feels very marital,
like the Doom conversation.
Yeah, it feels very old and intimate. They already know everything about each other, and like finally we meet, you know, and that, yeah, I love that because I think in the truest sense of the word family drama, that's what that relationship is. You know, like it's about the connection and obligation of this relationship. And that's, you know, not new territory in cops and robber stories. Let's be honest. It's pretty well tread, but it's really, really well done here. And it also makes us care about all the rest of this stuff. Whereas I can watch a Transformers movie and basically never care, you know, because like they're not connected to anything, you know?
Yeah. And Michael Bay doesn't care to develop a scene that makes you care about the character. They're stand-ins for, it could be
and
anybody.
Like I can't say this often enough to the audience who listens to this podcast, or really any movie-going audience. We all believe that we're watching action movies for the explosions and the blow-ups and the thrill ride, and we are. That's true. But the lingering thing that makes you care about it is almost always going to be a deeper emotional need that the character is meeting and is well told. Like almost always. Like I'm kind of working on a thesis in my mind, and I don't know if I can prove it yet. But like if you were to list like the really great action movies from the last 30 years, a whole bunch of them would be sneaky good family dramas in the way we defined it in this movie. Like Patriot Games, Heat, I think Die Hard, Lethal Weapon. And I haven't done those movies yet, but I could, and I think I'd be right. So you know, I just think it's sometimes like things don't change. You know what I mean? Like sure, the times change, but the things that matter to people don't really change. And I think that's what Heat is getting into. It's like this great novel about those things. It's sort of like when you read Dostoevsky's like Crime and Punishment. The subject of Crime and Punishment is actually quite simple. Like, could I get away with murder? What happens if I do that? Like, that's what it's about. But like, it's a great novel because, man, that's a deep thing to explore, like the pain and paranoia of a mistake, you know? And I think that's what's going on here as well. I also just, you know, the thing I admire the most about Michael Mann as a filmmaker is the discipline and precision and passion of these decisions that feel kind of functional at first. Like I kind of admire the depth of intelligence and thought process behind them, and hope to one day incorporate that kind of stuff into my filmmaking. I really admire it.
Yeah. Fuck yeah, man. I'm amped. I'm fucking amped right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
Got me going. The only thing I want to add, because I think this is super well done, is the only thing that I would disagree with, only because he's my main Damie. He's like my go-to, like this shit rips, and it's because of him. Directorially, I think you're absolutely right. I think Michael Mann did combine these elements in a way that had never been combined before. That is kind of the power and, you know, staying power specifically of Heat. A lot of these techniques were also used in the same genre by the very movie you kind of mentioned, and other movies that he had made. You chose Lethal Weapon, Die Hard.
You love John McTiernan. You love McTiernan. You love him.
He's so fucking good.
He is good.
And so the only thing I would just is that, like, if we're talking about frontiersmen in this regard, I got to give it to my boy Johnny. But you're absolutely right. Michael Mann, especially because McTiernan never, ever made a film that was anything like Heat in a way. Like, he never made that inspection of, like, the guilt and the needs
cost.
And the wants are so much more higher stakes. The cost, like the interplay of like what these things are all doing, the tragedy of it. He does it a little bit, you know,
but he's blown shit up
he
too.
He shows loss. Yeah. He justifies how he shows it. You know, that there's ways, but he is more of a genre filmmaker. And he was definitely more seminal in this film. Like, he did the telephoto shit. He did the sound design shit. He color palette, different movies. But, like, you know, most of this shit is in Die Hard. But absolutely right. He doesn't get enough credit for all the reasons that you mentioned.
I totally agree with you. about all of that. Michael Mann also, by the way, this is not like he didn't invent this for this movie. Like this is actually kind of his style. He had a lot of it in his earlier movies too, and has kept up with it in movies like Collateral and
Collateral,
also he's also
absolutely.
switched over to like digital filmmaking on like less good looking cameras. Like I think he kind of likes doing anti-aesthetics in some ways. Which hey, I'm all into that.
That's right.
I think that's cool.
Like you mentioned Soderbergh in the beginning, they're like, whatever. It's kind of about the people in front of the camera, not about the camera. So this is fine.
Yeah.
And that's, I'm into it.
Michael Mann's the kind of director who maybe people would never know who he is. Like he's right on the cusp of being a person that people might know. The same as John McTiernan.
I think that's probably true.
Yeah. The same as I would argue Sidney Lumet. Like, and there's some really truly gifted people who are in this tier of filmmaking.
If people forget John McTiernan, I will.
Well, you love him so much, and so do I. But like, these are the guys who you don't think of as being like the auteurs, like the Lynches and the Pedro Almodovars, who I love so much.
Because they ain't.
Yeah, that's right. Michael Mann makes softer decisions, and I think that's the difference between him and like. I guess I don't know. I guess Spielberg, or I guess Michael Bay. But Michael Bay doesn't seem to be interested in exploring the depth of the human condition much.
It's the quiet ones you have to worry about.
Yeah, well, the older I get, the more the older I get, the more I appreciate that kind of filmmaking.
Absolutely. Yeah, because I'm unenthused by loud stylistic choices only because it's because it seems so fleeting. It's flavor of the week. When you start attaining more and more years in your life, you realize, oh yeah, I did like that one that came out. That was very well done and it was very like cool. But then like people stopped thinking it was cool. So it's like playing a video game. Like, tell me if this makes sense. Like at a certain point with a video game, you like grind and grind and grind, and it's not that the observation that you go, all of this is useless. I've just been wasting hours into this game to like get that, next piece of armor or whatever. That was always true. Like the first hour you started playing the game, or the 100th hour you played the game, it all didn't matter.
Right. If that's the complaint, right?
But like there's something about when stylistic choices and loud stylistic choices are being made, and that's kind of like the thrust of why the movie's there, or like the story's being told, is like, look how cool this is. You start getting unenthused by it because but in like 5 years no one's gonna give a shit.
And also because they don't often, they do sometimes, but they don't often translate to enduring explorations of something about what we're doing here. Now, there's exceptions. Like I think Inarritu's last few films are loud and enduring in their inspection. Like he's the guy who instantly comes to mind. And I think you could make that argument of David Lynch too, that his inspections matter. But like the classic example I come to is Tarantino, who I do like a lot. I enjoy every single one of his movies, even the Hollywood one that I thought was an hour too long. But like, what does he really have to say? Like with these bombastic choices. In some ways, the bombastic choices feel like skipping the content for the style. That's a very dumb.
In all fairness, and I'm not one to usually have Tarantino's back, to be honest. But in all fairness, he's never been about that. He's never claimed.
Correct.
So I think he's smart. He made a smart decision, and he said, like, look, this is the type of movie I make. I like these things. And Edgar Wright is the same way. Like, he's like, yeah, no, I like grindhouse movies. Like, how awesome is Evil Dead, right? And it's just like, yeah, you're not wrong. That is awesome. Paying homage to it is like, that's fun. It's a good time. It's good for fun. It's fun, and so go have fun. And I'm going to go see it because I like fun as well. I don't really watch Heat for fun. I watch Heat because I'm like, this is a well-rounded experience. I do have fun in bits, but also like it's got me thinking, it's got me worried. like my heart starts beating more. Like I don't get that even in the best, Edgar Wright or Tarantino or Wes Anderson films. I don't like have a moment where I'm on the edge of my seat and I'm like, no, please don't die. Please don't die. Don't kill that person. Don't kill that person. The stakes aren't there.
It's pretty tough. Edgar Wright is so good at the bombast of cinema that I do experience a lot of the really rewarding cathartic feelings in his movies. Like he's a master.
Sometimes it transcends because it's so fun that you're like, I don't want to get off this ride. There's many excuses for that.
Like Hot Fuzz.
You're absolutely right.
No, you're right.
Hot Fuzz is a perfect fucking screenplay, and it's a really
Hot
really
Fuzz
good
is
movie.
incredible.
It's one of the best movies of that
Hot
decade.
Fuzz is an incredible movie that is so perfect at jokes and so perfect at the genre that it's making fun of that it is a transcendent experience.
Right. I don't want to shit on Edgar Wright, nor am I saying that like any stylistic approach, because I know I've said like stuff like Wes Anderson, I can't care anymore or whatever, and stuff like that. That does make it sound like I don't like it. No, I did like it. It's just like now I kind of feel like I've unlocked it.
I understand it now.
I've seen enough. And and I feel like, you pay attention, you start to see like the brilliant part about being an artist sometimes is that you can disappear for some years and then you go and do the same tricks. And then people go like, damn, that's cool. And they forget that like, oh, you played that trick on me before. It's just you've been gone for a while and I didn't think about you. And it's like, yeah, baby, use that time for you to surprise them. And that's really smart. And I think that a lot of these artists, almost all artists, use that to their effect.
And then there's
Michael Mann is someone who I feel like you can back him into a situation where he'll always make a movie that is thoroughly interesting to him.
And therefore to us, because he does know what's interesting. I
think so.
Everything you said is true, and then there's Spielberg. Right? Like he's that guy, man, who like, and I'm not even the biggest fan per se. You just know when you see it.
This guy's
got it all. Right.
You just see it. The package is there.
Sometimes I don't like the performances he gets.
It's my
Sometimes I think his movies are schlocky and I don't like their endings. But like, man, oh man, like he's
from
so
a craftsman
good.
standpoint, from just everything, just like he's like, I know I do this one thing and I do it very well.
You say that, and yet he made Jurassic
like,
Park and Schindler's List in the same year, and it's like. Those are diametrically opposed experiences, and they're both two of the best experiences of that decade, maybe ever. I don't know. Some people just get it all. You can't be mad at them when they got it all. What can you do? It's right. I haven't liked one of his movies in a long time, but man, he was the top of the world for a very long time, and deservedly so.
Just blew our little minds. Just took us out in the back.
E.T.
and blew
still
our
rips,
minds.
Man. E.T. is fucking incredible.
Yes, it does.
Jaws still rips. Anyway, we didn't go here to talk about Spielberg.
Oh, you don't need to tell me. The man who tried to change my job back when it was the first podcast I ever made was being told you can't just make a Spielberg podcast. You have to make a podcast about a bunch of different movies. And our workplace was like, don't. And I was like, oh, but I kind of just want to talk about Spielberg. I want to talk about 1941. I want to talk about Always. I want to talk about all these things because Spielberg is eternally fascinating to me.
Yeah. He's like Hitchcock. He's just one of those guys. Just figured it out.
Yeah, he's just one of those guys, man.
It was really fun. I thank you for.
I'm still amped.
The help, the constant help. You're the Val Kilmer to my De Niro today.
Yeah, just the works, just the. Didn't we mention that he was like Collateral and like isn't Michael Mann like. Has like several characters who like people who use guns or like next to John Wick, these guys like Val Kilmer in this movie and like Tom Cruise in Collateral, like the posturing they use when they use guns is like exactly what they teach you in in real
Val
gun
Kilmer's
school.
reload speed is apparently taught at special forces units from Heat.
Yeah, they use the film in classes is the trivia that
Which is
read.
Okay.
And that's
That really
insane because that's like, really, Val Kilmer?
I mean, Val Kilmer
Really?
to me seems like the high school quarterback of actors, where he's just very good at it, and he's ask him to do whatever he needs to do. He's the star athlete; he can do it. And then later in life, he had more misfortune, unfortunately.
Remember Mad Mardigan? Remember Mad Mardigan?
Yes.
Remember Willow?
Get out of
Remember
here.
Val Kilmer and Willow. It's good.
Really is. Okay, well,
It's
thanks, everybody.
Yeah, you're welcome.
This has been a Small Beans endeavor. We're a bunch of pals who make podcasts, sketches, music, web series, and movies. The Beans always have new ideas percolating, so make sure to check us out at patreon.com/smallbeans. That's patreon.com/smallbeans, where you can browse all of our current and past content, see what we've got planned in the future, and learn how your support can help the Small Beans grow into huge, giant monster beans. If you enjoyed this content module, please like, rate, subscribe, or tell a friend about us. We love you!